we're going to go from one great guest to another one. We are joined with investigative journalist Kit Klarenberg. How you doing, Kit? You doing okay this morning?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. How are you doing, Jamal? Sorry, did I just
I'm
catch the end of Lath shitting all over Max and Aaron? Or did
yes, within context. It's within a
Yeah.
context. It's within a
Okay.
context.
Yeah. No, it was
By the way,
just for clarity.
I disagree with him on that, by the way. I don't think, but look, it's if you are in that situation where you are under threat and they are bombing and blowing up your houses, you could be a little intense also. So I get where he's coming from, even though I think you need allies personally. In which case I did point out to him that shouldn't we have allies? But Kit Klarenberg, investigative journalist, documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perceptions. And I guess that is an awkward moment considering that you work on the Great Zone, also global delinquents. Yeah, that's awkward. But
no, it's all right.
again,
It happens. It happens. But yeah, no. I mean, it's a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And I think that we are living in very interesting times all round, my friend.
Yeah, I'm conflicted on this because I understand where he's coming from, even though my response is like, oh, dude, look, I make a distinction between allies. Like for myself, like people who fall on a similar side as you, and just as a human being, you look at an issue and you say, this is outrageous. Whatever my religious preference, whatever my ethnicity, this is outrageous. This is a horrible thing. I think Lath is coming at it from a different point, though. He is thinking like, dude, my home is being blown up. I had a guest on yesterday who's like, they just blew up my house and I need to rebuild my house. And my parents are in the line of fire. You get intense when your life is at stake. But yes, unfortunately, he was hitting Aaron and Max. So
yeah, well, I mean, I don't disagree that there are false allies on the who have hopped on the Palestinian bandwagon. But I think there is a very clear distinction between people like Max and Aaron who have dedicated most of their careers and indeed have at points, taken personal and professional risks to do so to side with the Palestinians, and people who suddenly after October 7th became bombastic tub thumpers for the Palestinian cause, having said nothing previously about the issue, but on other matters, we've seen some interesting developments in Ukraine recently. There is an.
By the way, real quick, I just want to interrupt real quick. I do agree with you on that. Max and Aaron had been on that issue for a very long time, even before October. So agree. I want to give you agreement. But yeah, but please continue. You're going in Pokrovsk. And Zelensky's delusions that Kupiansk is being held, that Russians have made no advances in Pokrovsk, and effectively sending those thousands of people to effectively death.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Pokrovsk it's yet another example of a city that we were told was this impenetrable bunker fortress and was absolutely central to Ukraine's defense against Russia in the Donbass. And then in recent weeks, as Russia has systematically encircled it to the point that there's now a very thin strip of the city, the main kind of section of the city, with an indeterminate number of Ukrainian soldiers basically trapped in facing certain death or surrender after a embarrassingly failed effort to try and extract these trapped soldiers. part of me thinks that this has been kind of forgotten about, but it was absolutely insane that like the Ukrainians, or well, their Anglo-American puppet masters, dispatched helicopters to try and extract all of these soldiers, which does tend to suggest that there were some high-value people, perhaps Western military people amongst them, and the helicopters got shot at, scurried away. It was a total disaster. It seems like exactly the kind of thing that Britain would cook up, thinking, oh yeah, we can do this kind of Hollywood style rescue operation, and it failed miserably. And now we're being told that Pokrovsk actually never mattered anyway, in the same way that the Bakhmut didn't matter, and Mariupol doesn't matter, and blah blah blah. But this is one area among many where the Russians have been slowly but surely advancing, and it is a ample demonstration of what even Ukrainian, honest Ukrainian analysts, who do exist, shockingly, have been saying for a very long time, which is that Ukraine does not have the manpower to maintain the quote-unquote front line. The front line is a very, very porous concept at the moment, because such as the evolution of drone warfare, Russia can strike 30 kilometers from the line of contact using drones. So, I mean, where is that front line? It's very questionable. But Ukraine's running out of people. They can't maintain their positions. They're desperately clinging on with far too few soldiers, and with a almost total reliance on drone attacks to try and stave off Russian advances. Whether the fall of Pokrovsk will lead to these big arrow advances that we've been hearing a lot about from pro-Russian commentators for a very long time, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. But it's certainly significant, and I think that there are other places like Izium, there's and territory near Kharkov, which could likewise fall quite soon. And once these fortress areas have fallen, then it's pretty much, the rest of Ukraine is pretty much flatland. Hence why Ukraine has historically been the invasion, provided the invasion route for the Swedish and the French and the British and the Americans in 1917, and then Hitler, and it's why Russia will never tolerate Ukraine being part of NATO, and the current the source of the current proxy conflicts among other things. But yeah, I think that it's as I say, we've seen this very interesting and all too common kind of narrative shift, where we've gone from impregnable fortress Russia can never take, and absolutely fundamental to Ukraine's defense, to well, actually, this isn't a defeat.
It doesn't matter at all.
But it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
Yeah. And I think. Sorry. Go ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
No,
Go
please. Well, I was going to say, Ukraine is screwed. I mean, Kupiansk, Russia is saying there are about 50 buildings left in Kupiansk to get rid of, in which case Kupiansk falls. They're talking about Pokrovsk, where 80% of it has been taken, and they're in mopping up operations. Seversk also, again, is under attack and will fall pretty soon. I mean, ultimately, what we're going to end up with is, I don't know if it's a big arrow, but it seems like there are a lot of cauldrons that are taking place all at once, where all of these, let's say, cities are going to fall back to back to back, because all of them are being pressured all at once. And that is not a good thing. I mean, there's one last city. Oh, what is the name of it? It'll come to me in a moment, which is effectively their main fortress city that is going to be remaining in Donbass. This is not a situation of success. And Zelensky seems to be falling into delusion by putting out proclamations like, no, Russians aren't making any advances in Pokrovsk. We're good. We're good. Or no, in Kupiansk, we're holding the line. We're holding the line. We're going to push them back in Kupiansk. It's like, dude, read the room. Like all of these people who are trapped in these locations are going to die. because they're not given the order for these people to effectively leave. Why do you think they continuously do that? This idea of we need to hold every inch, even though we have a manpower shortage, we need to continue to hold every inch. If at one point Zelensky decided the best thing, honestly, that Ukraine could have did was we need to hunker down. We don't need to have an offensive. We need to make the Russians pay for every inch of land that they try to take. But instead, they're like, we're going to have offensive, and we're going to have another offensive, and we're going to. And in each of these, they got mauled. Like they continuously got mauled, and they kept doing it. And whereas the Russians will have strategic retreats, like in Kharkov, in the very beginning, when they didn't have enough troops to hold, they were like, okay, we're backing out. Now, the West looked at that and says, hey, Ukrainians pushed the Russians back, missing the fact that the Russians made a strategic withdrawal because they didn't have the manpower to hold it, as opposed to leaving those people to die in that location. Ukraine does the exact opposite in every situation. It's astonishing to me. Why do you think they do that?
I mean, it does defy logical sense, and it's something that I myself have really wrestled with. And it's like, they are clinging tooth and nail. I mean, God bless the Ukrainians. I mean, they're descended from Cossacks. They are fighting. They're extremely brave in doing this. You got to give them some credit for that. But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever that they're just desperately, to the last man, trying to cling on to these territories, which in some cases are legitimately not that worth holding on to in the scheme of things. So that is a riddle. I have a variety of theories that have bounced around in my head about this. I might be completely delusional and wrong. I wonder whether the purpose is deliberately to run the AFU into the ground so they can't fight anymore. Because I think, as we've discussed on the show before, the far right in Ukraine, which is a small component of Ukrainian society and does not represent wider Ukrainian public opinion, but is enormously influential and is effectively in control of the Ukrainian government. They have made numerous figures, such as Andrei Beletsky, who's the founder of Azov Regiment, open neo-Nazi, has said, if Zelensky negotiates, then we're going to kill him, and then there'll be a full-blown, absolutely, like a full-blown fascist coup in the presidential palace, and we're just going to keep this going. So Zelensky finds himself, rather backed into a corner where this is completely unwinnable now. But if he even talks about making any concessions, well, he's a dead man, and there's all going to be all sorts of other consequences as well. So, I mean, again, and this is just purely speculation, but I wonder, particularly when you consider that they've now started letting Ukrainian males aged 18 to 21 leave the country, and an enormous number have. Yes. I wonder whether they are deliberately putting themselves in a position where they can't keep going, so they can finally enter negotiations. Again, it's just a theory, and I might be way off, but it's something which does play on my mind, because I'm no military strategist, and I'm no military historian, but I mean, just on a basic logical level, it doesn't make any sense.
That's grim.
Like,
That's
why are
grim.
they? Yeah, why are these units not being withdrawn? Like, this is what Russia did. Like in late 2022, they withdrew their forces from the other side of the Kherson voluntarily, because they realized they couldn't equip them and that they were at significant risk. So, and it's like, the initial phases of the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union consisted of the Soviets running eastwards away and giving up territory to the Nazis and allowing the Nazis to spread themselves too thinly and extend their logistics lines to unsustainable points. But I mean, that's a discussion for another day. But it's like there doesn't really seem to be any purpose to keeping these thousands and thousands of people in unwinnable positions. And even the conscription continues apace, and there was this. I posted about it on X yesterday, but there's this extraordinary story of how Angelina Jolie flew into Ukraine for a photo op. She was collected. She was collected by. She was collected at the airport. When she got dropped off at her hotel, her driver got press ganged and thrown into a military and he's probably dead. He's probably dead now. He's probably dead now. But it's just like they're still recruiting and snatching off the streets whatever male population exists, while allowing the younger Ukrainians, where there's been a significant pressure for a long time to open up recruitment. Conscription for younger generations of Ukrainians. Is the strategy, as I say, just get to the point where there's so few people who can be sent to the front line that Zelensky says, look, guys, we have no choice. We have to negotiate. Because, as I think we may have even discussed this on a previous program. I might be wrong, but Zelensky is lining up to be the next leader, and he is openly talking about running for president and starting a political party. And I think from the perspective of the Ukraine's Western backers, that they think that probably would provide them with, a propaganda shot in the arm. It's like, we've got this venerated military chief who's now in position. He's ready to reignite the fight and really stick it to the Russians. Blah blah blah. But even then, it's like they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the equipment, and the West doesn't have the equipment either. And it's like there's been a number of reports in the British media recently about how the Ajax, which is it's like an armored vehicle that Britain I think it was commissioned a decade ago. It's an armored vehicle which it had a very troubled gestation. It took many years in production. It has all sorts of problems. Hundreds of soldiers who took this Ajax light armored vehicle out on trial runs have lost their hearing because of a lack of insulation in the vehicle. I mean, it's just like something out of a. It's like something. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. Yeah. And it's like so they're going to send this armored vehicle into a war where armored vehicles have stopped being used because of drones. And it's like, I mean, the West doesn't have very much, if anything, to give Ukraine that's going to be useful. Again, on a similar note, The Economist recently reported about how Western drones that have been sent to Ukraine were crap. And didn't really work. So it's like, I mean, so many people have painted themselves into a corner here, and I think that Zelensky remains committed publicly to re-seizing Crimea and 1991 borders and all that. He knows that's not going to happen, but he knows, if he admits that publicly, just having all these people wiped out to the point that the Ukrainian army consists of some horses and some pregnant women armed with AK-47s. The mainstream media has already reported about how there are pregnant women in frontline combat roles, which is
I've seen them. I've seen them.
Unbelievable. So that could be an explanation. I am open to be challenged.
That is very grim. That is grim. Because what that means is effectively Zelensky is like, all right, I need you guys to hold fast. knowing full well that 10,000 people are either going to get die or get taken out. And to do it over and over and over and over again. I mean, Ukraine has lost like 1 million men already. And so it's like, how many more are they going to lose before Zelensky is like, all right, well, we have 2 pregnant women and a horse. Time to call this a day.
Yeah.
That is grim. That is grim. See, my idea was that the point was to overextend Russia. And because the goal is to overextend Russia, Europe has nothing to give in this, meaning Europe has nothing to lose. The US has nothing to lose. And so it's not like they're flag-draped coffins coming back of Americans or flag-draped coffins of Brits coming back. I mean, maybe there are a few, but those are, skiing accidents in the middle of summer. Like, these aren't mass-scale bodies coming back where the public gets engaged and the public gets very angry. From the standpoint of the US, from the standpoint of the Europeans, those are the Ukrainians that are dying. That's not us. And so if the goal from the European and the American standpoint is to overextend Russia, then maybe you want Russia to have to fight tooth and nail for everything, even in situations where it is obviously lost. And so it's like the Russians, Vladimir Putin has been setting himself on fire to have negotiations and to get this war over with in negotiations. And yeah, obviously the Russians have a position because losers don't get to dictate terms. So they're going to put out a document that is effectively a surrender document because they won the war. Well, if you're Europe and America and your point of view is our objective is to overextend Russia, period. If Russia needs to take all of Ukraine and they need to raise a military of 2 million men to do that, then that accomplishes our objective of overextending the Russian Federation. And so if you're Zelensky and the Europeans are like, hey, we're backing you, you would think that there would be something in Zelensky that gives a shit about his own population, though, which is the wild part to me. But as you point out, if Zelensky does that, off goes his head. He is going to be hanging from a flagpole somewhere in Kiev, and he knows it. So it's such a catastrophe, right? Like it's like there are pressures that are built into this that prevent it from being stopped. Not to mention the money that people are making. Like, think about the money that is going to weapons manufacturers, weapon contractors, the money that is fleeing Europe into America in order to buy weapons that they don't even have yet, that won't be available for the next several years. And you have money in one case. You have Zelensky, who's terrified that his life is going to be at stake. You have the Europeans and Americans that have no feedback mechanism that compels them to end the war. And so the Ukrainian soldier just keeps getting slaughtered. It sucks. I don't know which one it is. You could be absolutely right that Zelensky's like, hey man, I need some of these people to die for me to finally end this war. It even crossed my mind that maybe Trump wants people to die. That Trump is like, all right, I need them to keep fighting. I need the Russians to kill as many Ukrainians as possible in order to force it into the war where we can accept some kind of deal. I don't know. But my prevailing thought is the goal, or the very least in the policy papers and the RAND documents, was overextend Russia. And how do you do that? You do it by keep fighting, even when you know you've lost. So
yeah, indeed. Well, it's like that is of course another long-standing objective, and it must be said that Russia has been heavily tied up by this. Their focus has been almost entirely on Ukraine, and they've seen their former close ally Armenia turn westward. They've seen their former close ally Syria collapse and be overrun by Western-backed terrorists. I suppose if that is the objective, then that to an extent they're achieving that. But at the same time, I mean, the much of the West's focus militarily and financially is being drained by this as well, and I would say to a far more damaging extent, because I mean, you mentioned that Europe not having any weapons. I read a report the other day that was hilarious, where it was talking about how it was in the financial media, and it was talking about how the share price of European defense contractors are soaring And even their own CEOs are saying we're overvalued because the money being pumped into us is based on the idea that we're going to be able to produce all of these weapons for Ukraine, and that's going to take years.
Yes.
It's like it's like if Enron was honest. It's like they are the heads of these companies are admitting that our stock market value is falsely inflated based on things that we haven't delivered and might not be able to deliver for a very long time, if at all. So it's like meanwhile. I think that there was I read it was a government account, a US GAO, was it government accountability office review that found that like 8% of US ground combat vehicles were battle ready. So it's like again, what can be sent to Ukraine by either the US or Europe is very, very questionable. And so, I mean, they're suffering too. It might come down to this might be perhaps best perceived as like, a wide war of attrition in every field. And I think that it's something that, Russia is a much more better prepared to weather than the West is.
And by the way, I made that argument that part of, like, Putin has been getting a lot of criticism. And I want to go to your article before we close this, because it relates to the whole false flag thing, not false flag, color revolution thing that initiated all of this in the first place.
Yes.
But, I made that argument myself, that people have criticized Putin for the slow going of this kind of war of attrition that they've decided to enact. But if you think about it, if you think of all the military equipment that Europe has sent, all the money that they've sent, the governments are effectively bankrupt. It has not gone well for Europe. And you have all of this money fleeing Europe from the standpoint of the oil that is buying from the US, where they're paying, 4 or 5 times higher rates. They're still getting Russian oil, but they're getting it at a markup through like Turkey or Saudi Arabia. And the money that Europe is sending out in order to go from weapons. Like, there is a fleecing of Europe where all of this money in Europe has been fleeing into the United States, not to mention the companies that went belly up because they couldn't afford the energy costs. Those companies, many of them have gone to the US. If you're Russia and you're looking at this, you're like, slow and steady. Slow and steady. We're going to drain you dry. We're going to destroy all of your weapons, and we're going to destroy them in Ukraine so you can't use them in a larger third world war that you may be trying to enact. We're going to bleed you dry from the standpoint of the money. I mean, right now they're talking about their concern that the IMF is going to not give Ukraine money, which Ukraine is going to go belly up, which is why they're, like hyenas trying to get the Russian money, to steal the Russian money that's on the Belgian banks. And they are unclear if Belgium is even going to give them the money in that case. Like, this is not a recipe for success. Europe has been taking a hit. I mean, you're getting German leaders saying, hey, man, I don't care what the German needs right now. We need to help Ukraine. And think about that. I need to take a cold shower for Ukraine. Are you out of your mind? I don't want to take cold showers. It's cold in Germany, right? I want to be able to heat my house. And so it's like, this is the argument that these guys are effectively making to their populations. And I don't think that argument flies, especially with these governments in debt, in the way that these governments are in debt, and the way that the money is fleeing out of Europe. Slow and steady, if you're the Russians. That's what they're looking at.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's that great line from the Taliban, which is, "You have watches, we have time." Though there's like, I mean, I'm probably now on yet another terrorism watch list for quoting